you go.
All right, I want to thank everyone for coming out today and joining us, making time in your schedules for this discussion on driving a power agenda, a people-powered, sorry, I can't say it, people-powered agenda in St. Louis. I'm Kia Caldwell. I'm the Vice Provost for Faculty Affairs and Diversity here at WashU and also a professor in African and African American Studies. And I'm just really happy that we can have this conversation in April, leading up to, a big election and all kinds of things happening across the country. I'm really excited and delighted that Taifa Smith Butler can be with us today from Dēmos. And I want to thank the Dēmos team for, especially Vanessa and Francis, for all of their support putting this event together remotely. And then also Stephanie and Gary from the Clark Fox Policy Institute, and our speakers for today, Ashli and Jamala, and everyone who's come out today, all the activists and advocates who are here with us as well, and the organizations that are represented. So we're going to have a conversation about the work that's happening here in St. Louis and also at the national level with Dēmos, and then leave some time for discussion. We have a nice sized group, but one that's intimate enough where we can have a conversation. So we're actually going to start off with having each speaker introduce themselves and let us know about the critical work that you're doing to advance justice and equity and democracy, here in St. Louis, but also across the country. And I'm going to start here with Ashli at the end, please.
Hello. Good afternoon. I'm Ashli Bolden with Missouri Jobs with Justice. And some of the critical work we're working on right now is during the session, making sure that they will not stop the ballot initiative process. And we just collected enough signatures to get minimum wage and earn sick days on the ballot. We're helping with the abortion ballot initiative and a lot of other stuff. I'll stop there.
Good afternoon. I'm Jamala Rogers. I'm with the Organization for Black Struggle. In fact, I'm one of the proud but humble founders of the group. And next year we'll be celebrating our 45th anniversary. So some of the work that we've been doing is like just a continuation of our 4 pillars that we were founded on: empowering women, youth, and workers, and also around the prison industrial complex. So all of that really puts us in the front of democracy fighting. So some of the same issues that Ashli talked about, we've been doing those as well.
Good afternoon or good evening, everyone. My name is Taifa Smith Butler, and I'm president of Dēmos. And I'm just honored to be here with my fellow partners in crime. Dēmos is a national think tank focused on building a just, inclusive, multiracial democracy and economy. And part of the work that we've done over the last 9 years is working with incredible leaders like Jamala and Ashli, who work at the state level in communities to really build power for Black and brown folks. And our organization has partnered with them to provide the kind of space and place where they can dream together and lead together and really learn from one another. And our work, again, as a think tank, is to try to marry what are the right kind of policy solutions and ideas that we need to put forward to actually build the kind of inclusive democracy and economy that we deserve.
Thank you so much, Taifa. So we have known each other for many years and are good friends. And, I'm excited to see you now as the president of Dēmos and, the work that you're doing. And you lead a national policy organization that partners with state-based and grassroots organizations to drive policy, research, and legal strategy. What are you hearing from the field about the biggest opportunities and threats to our democracy and economy in this moment?
When just thinking about this question, you always sort of think about what are the opportunities and threats. Should you lead with the threats or do you lead with the opportunities, right? What's the sense of urgency that we really have when we are on the brink of an election that is really consequential? And I think, the more we've talked over the last couple of election cycles about how democracy is on the line, and everything that we are voting for and building power for is about ensuring that we have voice and a say in this thing called democracy. And, you know, I cannot understate enough that this is a critical moment, a historical moment in our country, right? And I think for those of us who believe in the work of making sure that people have agency and self-determination in this country, you know, what's the thing that is going to help us get there? And that's the brilliant, I think that's the opportunities that I see, you know, on the horizon with groups like Jamala's OBS and Jobs with Justice, is really trying to make sure that we connect the everyday issues of folks to those who are sitting in seats of power to make the decisions that when they are in those seats, that they don't forget the people that they represent. And I think right now, some of the threats that we really see is a real concerted effort to undermine and to further marginalize people of color, women, LGBTQ plus communities, and their voices. And when we talk about the threat of authoritarianism, you know, it's not sort of just throwing out these big flat-out words. It is really what we see in all the tactics that are underway in this country to further marginalize groups, to take all the power from the courts, to ensure that corporations have an outsized influence in our democracy. And these are the things that really, I think, are problematic for the work that we're trying to do to build a multiracial democracy. So by and large, I think those of us who believe in ensuring that the people have power and the people have a say, we are up against a real like multi-pronged approach when it comes to our opposition. You know, they are well funded. And when we think about what sort of groundwork that they're, you know, sort of deploying right now from a narrative game. We talked a little bit about this even in academia, right? After the affirmative action case was lost or won, depending on, you know, how you think about it, it has had a chilling effect on those of us who are doing the work of racial justice, because now it's sort of those of us who are trying to really be explicit about, you know, racial justice in this country now feel a little bit censored. Like we can't be explicit about race. We can't talk about the harms and the disparity that this country has, you know, demonstrated for over 200 plus years, right? And so I think those are the things that we have to really be conscientious of. The narrative that is now being played out, the retraction that we see from not only our philanthropic partners and sort of businesses, you know, where after George Floyd was murdered, you had all of the racial justice monies flowing, you know, big time from corporations, from philanthropists, from the donor community, really trying to address the issues. But now, given these cases, there's been a chilling. And so again, that retraction is very dangerous for where we're trying to go. And I think lastly, I'll just say, what we also see is sort of the real threats of violence. And those of our partners who are doing this groundwork really have to take stock in these threats and take them serious as we think about what might be the political violence post or pre and post November. So those are some of the big threats that I see.
Thank you so much. I mean, there's so much happening, and it does feel like the folks who are not in this room, who we are kind of struggling against, are so well organized and have been planning. And something I've been thinking about is this moment to some of us, you know, it's kind of, it was unthinkable. Some of us believe so much in the work, right? That to see it be rolled back and roll back so quickly, it's just like, it makes your head spin. And so, you know, how do we then respond? And when we were discussing this conversation a few days ago, I thought about Brazil, which is where I do most of my research. And so when we think about authoritarianism, there was a military dictatorship there between 1964 and 1985. It was illegal to talk about race or racism. People who studied racism were in prison, they were persecuted, they went into exile. And so these things absolutely are interconnected when we think about the attacks on higher education, the attacks on DEI work.
Critical
and
race
really
theory.
Critical race theory. If we can't talk about structural racism, then we can't address health disparities. And there are bills pending in terms of medical schools, right? And what can be taught in medical schools and so forth. So all of these things are interconnected. Jamala, I'm gonna turn to you and ask you to bring us closer to home, here to St. Louis. You're a founding member and the executive director of the Organization for Black Struggle, OBS, which was established in 1980, as you were saying. So it is 44 years old this year. And is there something different? Do you think there's something different about this moment? And what in your work feels the most critical for people to act on right now?
So, obviously, this is a different era, and I was listening to Taifa when she was saying about the election, and almost every 4 years we say, this is the election, if we don't, the sky's gonna fall down, and so people have become a little bit numb to that. It's like, yeah, you said that 4 years ago, you said that 8 years ago, but this is a different time. We've seen a lot of rollbacks of, basic democratic rights and basic liberties. But I think, the thing that's probably most disturbing is the level of violence in this country. For those who have a differing opinion, when we had the election 4 years ago, there were people who stood up even as a result of their job, at these voting places, and who were targeted, who were, literally almost ran out of town. They had like death threats. I mean, this it's just like ratcheted up across the field. And I remember, you got people like Joseph Peniel who wrote about the Third Reconstruction, and those of us who've been studying history, particularly of Black gains and losses, we know that we are in the Third Reconstruction. And if you really believe that, then you have to organize differently. And right now, and I hope my colleague Ashli speaks to this, but for those of us who've been organizing for a while, we don't see people organizing differently when they should be. So it seems like, from my vantage point, that people see the threat, they truly understand it, and then they just work harder. So they're just like little hamsters on a wheel, just going like that. But there needs to be some other kinds of analysis of the period that we're in. Otherwise, you're going to get burned out, and then we still are going to be in the mess that we're in. So when I look at the political landscape, the organizing landscape, I just see people doing the same thing. And in fact, actually doing it in a sectarian and in a silo way. And I'm like, this is the time we need to be like communicating. We need to be like working together. And it's just like people are so in a siege mentality that it's like, if I got to do my work, I got to do my work. Well, yeah, but all of our work is towards the same end. And so I just think that one of the things, for example, Black and brown communities have to start thinking about is community security. And folks who know me and the Organization for Black Struggle know I'm not talking about the police. I'm talking about developing your own defense and protection mechanisms for whatever is about to come. And that's the reality of it.
Thank you. All right, Ashli, so you have led critically successful campaigns on tax reform, workers' rights, and ensuring that all Missourians have the right to vote. What does it mean to commit to and invest in building power for Black and brown communities? And what are some of the barriers that you're seeing in this work right now? Just a few.
Just a few. So, what was the first half of the question?
So the first half was, so barriers, what does it mean to commit to and invest in building power for Black and brown?
Yeah, what does it mean to commit to and invest? I think there's a lack of investment in building in Black and brown communities. I feel like there is a lack of organizing in Black and brown communities. It seems like you said, Taifa, the money has dried up around that. And it's not much door-to-door operations. It's not much community meetings. It's not much organizing, I would say. I feel like we used to go and meet with the legislators about certain issues. And I feel like a lot of that has stopped because people just want a quick result. Just elect somebody, right? Just go elect them and let them do their job, and that's it. And I feel like a lot of conversations I have with people are around, you can't just elect folks, you have to go and organize them and also teach them how to organize in whatever entity they're in. So whether that's Jefferson City, whether that's St. Louis City, how are the legislators working together to pass policy that Black and brown people need in their communities? I don't feel like there's enough, well, there's plenty of research, right? There's plenty of think tanks to tell us what we need to do, but who's actually fund that organizing or those projects to get it done? A barrier is also like these outstate legislators who legislate against their own interests, who legislate against the interests of the people in their own districts. They passed House Bill 1878, right, which is a big omnibus democracy bill where they put in early voting. That was like the candy, but there was you need to show your photo ID. They got rid of the presidential primary, which confused a lot of people, really pissed the Republicans off. So I bet you that'll be coming back. But for that to come back, now it's like, well, what's the new bill that's going to get us our presidential primary again, where they're just going to take something else away? And we have to spend all of our money in courts suing these people around, it's against the law to tell me that I need a photo ID. How many people don't have access to birth certificates that are of a certain age, that come from a certain background? It ain't just Black people. There's a lot of people in this state who aren't from this state. It's a lot of nuns. It's a lot of older adults that need that. But barriers is what they love to put up. Steal money in politics. We fought to get money out of politics. They passed it the session after to allow it back in. I mean, corporate greed is a huge thing, and they just pay to play. And how much doom and gloom can they do to us, which is the barrier of, if I'm at work, working 2 or 3 jobs, so I can send my child to school, have some food, send this kid to daycare, I can't advocate for myself. I can't come outside. I can't make it to the phone bank because I'm tired. And so the corporations already aren't just playing in that arena. They aren't paying these parents enough. I hate when they do the study on child poverty. These kids don't make money. Child poverty comes from the parents. So like, there's a quick solution, and it's more money.
So I was thinking about how, I guess, a bill passed recently in Missouri about how corporations won't have to pay taxes, right? And it's sales tax and any other tax, or, okay. Because in terms of the tax base for the
Yes,
state.
and
right?
the internet tax, we don't pay.
Oh,
Yeah.
so who doesn't pay internet tax?
If we buy things on the internet, there's no sales tax.
Oh, sales tax, right.
Yeah, so
that's-
it's a lot of taxation missing.
Mhm.
And in St. Louis, a lot of the large nonprofits don't pay taxes. So it's more dollars missing from the St. Louis economy.
Right, okay. Thank you. So back to you, Taifa, we're kind of going around. Dēmos recently released the power agenda. So I have the executive summary, and you all can get it on their website, demos.org. Okay. So this seems to be a North Star for the organization over the next few years. Can you share more about what it means to build a collective agenda that centers your partners, Black and brown communities, and also why it is so important in this moment?
Yep, thank you. I think for all the reasons that we have talked about, when I took this role nearly 3 years ago now, time is flying, y'all. Whew. One of the things that really sort of gave me pause was thinking about the demographic shift that is happening in this country. You know, America is projected to be majority people of color by 2043. So in 2 decades, there will be no sort of demographic majority because there'll be, you know, if you look at sort of people who are ethnic or racial minorities, quote unquote, they will take up or make up the sort of the majority of this nation. And as we have talked about, right now, demonstrating in our democracy, corporations have a lot of the sway and say in terms of the policies that get made, or those, you know, who have been doing expose types of research and looking at these oligarchs or these big time billionaires who are investing in strategies around, you know, packing the courts with conservatives or taking away religious or enshrining religious freedoms as opposed to reproductive freedom. There is a real strategy afoot. And so when we launched the power agenda, it was really about how do we ensure with this 2-decade shift that we build power for those who continue to be marginalized, that we're actually focusing on rewriting the rules so that the people rule. And that's kind of how I'm framing it. Because right now, when we think about tax policy, it is written in a way that by and large benefit those at the top, right? And so we have a very regressive tax code that ensures that those who are low income, trying to get to the middle class, pay more. And we don't have those who have the ability to pay more, right? And so there needs to be real tax code reform so that we can right size when we talk about the racial wealth gap. You know, we always talk about child poverty and low income and people struggling to get to the middle class. One of the core policies that will help address that is the tax code. And so that's fundamentally important. And so in this sort of power agenda, we've named 5 core programs that we are trying to advance. One is economic security for all. Everybody should be able to meet their basic needs, period, full stop. And that means how do we ensure that not only that people can benefit from the goods and services, and we have funding and support to invest in those goods and services in a way that really helps provide the kind of security for families. So we're talking about housing, childcare, healthcare, and things like that. Economic mobility for all. We see right now that the current generation is predicted to be worse off than the previous generations. And so we want to reverse that. We want to ensure that people can make the choices in their lives so that they can be upwardly mobile and have more money in their pocket, as Ashli said, because at the end of the day, cash matters, money matters for people's livelihood and their well-being. The third is ensuring full political participation. And again, we look at all of these barriers that are put up in terms of voter ID and, you know, this many days versus that many days to be able to automatically register to vote or to, you know, have same day voter registration. There are some really common, simple solutions that are just baseline fundamental that we could advance to really ensure that everyone has full on access to the ballot, which is the one way that we can ensure that we've got sort of people who are then representing our interests, let alone looking at money in politics and ensuring that there are more opportunities for people like you and me to actually run for office and sit in those seats and represent our communities. So that's where we look at representative and accountable government. We've got to get money out of politics. We've got to reform campaign finance so that we can have more people being able to run for office and being supported by the public dole so that, you know, you can diversify those who are in those seats. And then finally, we want to make sure that we have an expansive and inclusive electorate. And so all the ways that we've looked at how immigrants continue to be marginalized, also those who are returning from being in our systems impacted folks who've dealt with the criminal legal system, they continue to not have the full-on ability to engage in our politics. And so we want to make sure that we can re-enfranchise those populations, again, because these choices have been made on purpose that keeps people out on the margins and not being able to fully engage. And I will just say this, Kia, and I'll stop, is as we think about the value of diversity and the fact that we do have a sort of more people, young people, this multi-generational approach of like ensuring our elders, right, and our young people are being able to sort of engage together and talk about the issues that matter. You know, who's going to represent that cross-generational voice? That's really important, right? But also the message and the narrative that is being used right now around fear, to make it seem that if we give the kind of full political participation to this divergent, this growing, diverse electorate, somebody's going to lose power. And at the end of the day, that's what this fight is about, power. And I know that we talk about sort of our goal and hope that we can build the kind of economic and political power for Black and brown folks. But what we're seeing right now in the opposition is hoarding place from corporations and from those who identify as white. And so how do they think about this as a threat? This is where we see all of the tactics of the political apparatus to say, you know, we don't want to be the minority. We want to protect our interests. And so we're going to continue to sort of strengthen our position and our stake in the world. And what you said about Brazil, I just came from the UK from a national or a global conference, and these issues are taking place all over in every continent. When it comes to sort of the threat of authoritarianism, when it comes to the threat of sort of how can't even say it well, LGBTQ plus communities are being marginalized all over the globe, how the religious right is sort of rising and trying to codify religion and sort of Christian nationalism and how it is showing up in this country in a way that is happening all over the place. And so again, what does this mean for us as global citizens when it comes to the work that we have to do to ensure democracy is protected all over?
So many things together. And yeah, it definitely feels like we're at a crossroads in this country and I think globally, as you just said, because, and I just tend to feel like it's tied to demographic shifts. And you pointed out what, 2037, 2040, 2043, we will be a majority BIPOC country. I remember reading, I think back in the fall, that already the majority of US high school graduates are students of color. So it's no, you know, it's no coincidence that we had that Supreme Court ruling about affirmative action and that so many other things are happening because most of our youth actually are students of color. I mean, we're already there when it comes to the youth, right? And then, you know, in terms of higher ed also, I know that the power agenda talks about decriminalizing protests or the criminalization of protests. And so we need to keep our eye on what's happening with college students now with the protests that are happening across the country, right? And what's going to be the outcome, because I think that's a harbinger for other types of protests, particularly if certain folks get into power. So many freedoms that we've taken for granted, they're on the line. And, you know, it's not only, I think it's not only about Black and brown power and Black and brown folks, but it's, you know, there are these larger questions. They're hitting us first, but they're for the whole country, right? So Jamala and Ashli, your organizations and both of you work closely together in St. Louis and beyond. What are some of the campaigns your organizations are leading together? And also, what can we do to support your work? Because I know you have some information out there that I hope our audience members will pick up, but you know, what are you doing? How are you collaborating? And how can we support you?
So let me just say, we got a long history together. And in fact, I would say that OBS had a lot to do with nurturing Jobs with Justice into existence. Yeah. So so yeah, so they are our little cousins. And so we've been working together for a while. And so a lot of our focus is very similar. I mean, We believe that base building is important. We believe that workers are the key. And so all our work is around base building and building power for workers. So when I think about, and the things that we're working on now are, well, we just finished the living wage piece, but you talked about the protests. So we've been working, this is going to be probably the third or fourth year that we've collaborated on pushing back anti-protest legislation that keeps coming up in the state legislature. And, we've been able to beat it back, but each time the climate is a bit different. They've gained a little bit more strength. So I don't know this time what's going to happen. The fact that the Supreme Court booted that case, McKesson versus Doe, it's problematic because now with the stroke of a pen, 3 southern states are going to be, they don't even have protest as one of the tactics that they use. And so for us, I think just we're going to have an issue of just more than organizing around the issue, because a lot of the tools and the tactics that we had at our disposal are being taken away. So the ballot initiative, we've been fighting that for a few years. If that takes that, we've been very successful with using the ballot initiative to deal with, expansion of Medicaid. So if that's taken away and you don't have the resources that it takes to do a ballot initiative statewide, which is in the millions of dollars, then you have successfully crushed worker power. And so we're going to have to be creative about how we figure this out in this particular age, but it's not looking good for us. I'm just going to tell people that it's not looking good. And so when I think about for people of African descent in particular, so not only are we dealing with these day-to-day issues, now you're dealing with the whole criminalization of your past, of your history, of your culture, the erasure of your very being in this country. So we're going to be fighting on multiple levels, and how much of that can people really take? And so I think we're going to have to be smarter. We're going to have to be more analytical about how we do this work. But it's a mountain ahead of us when I think about the organizing that's to be done in this particular state. Because when you look at the executive branch, the judiciary, the legislative branch, all of those are pretty much dominated by the right. And so they've done this chess game, and they pretty much have checkmated us. And then some of us are over there at the checkerboard. So we got some problems. we didn't even learn how to play chess. We over there with the checkers. So so I see the challenges sometimes more than I see the opportunities, and I'm an eternal optimist, but I'm looking at the reality of these people building power. They pretty much have snatched the narrative. They well-resourced, and we don't seem to understand the real threats is my concern.
Some other stuff we work on is protecting local control. They constantly try to take over the St. Louis City Police Department again and again and again. And thank God, Jamala brings it to our attention every year when they try to do it. It's just ridiculous. But I'll say this is our first year getting into a school board race because of all of the anti-DEI stuff in Springfield, out of all places. And so struggling with what business do we have in a school board race as Jobs with Justice if we're not just talking to them about workers, but our community down there spoke out, and it's about DEI and the anti-history part. And so people are watching and people are listening and hoping that we are doing everything we can to stop all of this horrible legislation and horrible people being elected to these school boards and to these local councils where they are voting all this stuff down.
So the connection is that if you don't get the right school board people in there, then they're going to be hiring anti-labor,
Already done.
contractors, and it's going to be over.
Yeah, it was, people were surprised that the NEA, sorry to name drop, were really getting behind a lot of these DEI folks. And we have to understand that they're an association. They might not be a real union sometimes. But we fight with AFT, who is a real union, against the anti-DEI stuff in the schools, but also they're organizing drives so these teachers can be a lot stronger. And so we just left a KIP protest Friday. They're trying to organize the KIP high school. And it all just takes it back to public services again and the tax conversation. Because next year we be working on the earnings tax where the city gives us 1%. They charge us 1% earnings tax. You work in the city, pays for city services, parks, all this stuff. Where did that come from? That came from Rex, billionaire, a billionaire who was tired of paying that 1%. But it's not just the Rexes, right? It's also a company called Midas that is in the city trying to build all these hotels and high-rise apartments. They don't want to pay taxes. They don't want to pay the people that are building. They don't want to pay the people that work inside the building. And so again, we are just allowing these corporations to thrive off of our backs while our kids can't get funded schools because of all this regressive tax of how we even fund the schools. Ugh.
Tips.
That's what I was talking about, the tips. They don't have to pay. You build up, you go about your business and leave the people who live in the building, work in the building to struggle. And so Jay with Jay is going to engage in a campaign to figure out how we do get these large nonprofits like the one we're in now to kick in some money to start helping pay for services in U City, in St. Louis City. Like there are large universities that do this in other cities like Pennsylvania, where they are helping fund some of their schools. And so imagine if this institution paid even half of the taxes they probably owe. We could use that for wraparound services with kids in SLPS that their parents are struggling to keep them in their homes and keep them fed and things like that. So it all comes back to tax policy. Thanks, Taifa.
And corporate greed.
And corporate greed, yes.
So money, right? So we're gonna wrap up this part soon, and then open it up for discussion. But I just want to thank you for sharing your incredible work. I've learned a lot. I know there's a lot more to learn as someone who's new to St. Louis. So we need to figure out some ways to educate our community, I think, even more on these issues. And so thank you, Taifa, Ashli, and Jamala. We have young leaders and students and so many others from our WashU and St. Louis community with us tonight. Can you share one thing that you hope people are leaving the space with tonight? And if you have any words of hope, I think we do have to remain inspired. That is something that kept our foreparents going, foremothers, forefathers. But any words of insight, encouragement, hope?
Well, I'm going to say, again, I'm an eternal optimist. And so you can't do this work without having hope, but you also have to have a certain amount of reality. And I think what I would ask that people take away is that we are all in this together. And so when you asked about what can people do, people don't have to support OBS or JWJ, but they need to support some organizations that's out here fighting. And I know a lot of times people feel like they're removed or like, what can I do? Or, they're despondent, is, frustrated, but we don't have the luxury of doing that right now. We can't be frustrated to the point where we're paralyzed or we throw up our hands. You need to find some way to be a part of this fight for democracy, because that's really what is at stake. Everything that we've been talking about, if we don't have the ability to be included in the decision making, even in the tax discussions, then we're going to be more than marginalized. We're going to be shut down, and then this whole authoritarianism that's coming through with quite a vengeance, I must say. Then we'll be inside of our houses trying to figure out what just happened, when we've already been told. That man told y'all on day one, if he gets elected, he already told you So it's no hiding the hand, throwing the rock and hiding the hand. He's been very clear about where this country's gonna go. So I think we ought to, as Audre Lorde told us, somebody, not Audre Lorde, that was Maya Angelou. If somebody tells you who they are, believe it. And we ought to believe Trump when he tells us what he's gonna do with this country.
Thank you. Ashli, Taifa.
I would just say, I am, one of the things that I'm optimistic about is the activism that I see from young people. And we see it now even, on campuses like Columbia. And, for whatever it's worth, what I'm hopeful is that we, can continue to provide the kind of knowledge and information and direct the activism in a way that's really going to help to make change. And I think, when we like look at all the things on the landscape, as Jamala and Ashli said, it's a lot, and we could be very discouraged and go home and shut the door and throw our hands up, but we cannot see the ground. And I think to everything that you said about those who fought before us, and when I think that we're just 60 years out from the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act, and it is already being undermined and whittled away. We have a very young democracy, y'all. And again, looking at all these other nations and on the continent, like they have been around here for millennia, and we've just been here for a couple hundred years. And so again, what we want for America, we've got to fight for it. And it is a very young democracy. It is ebbing and flowing. And it is one that is sort of highly, highly influenced by those money interests. And I think for us is there are fewer of them and there are more of us is the thing that I keep thinking about. And even though those sort of on the megaphones right now who are very loud, but when I think about those who are, seeding hate and, this polarized politic that we're living in, like they're marginalized. They're a small sort of segment of the population. So how do we take our populism and those who are with us and believe in valuing all humans, regardless of where they live and what they look like and who they love? Like there are more of us who believe in that kind of value system. And so how do we advance the kind of vision for America that we want? And I think that's where I would want the young people to engage and get involved and volunteer, knock doors. And again, from a policy standpoint, like Ashli said, everything is connected to policy choices. So how can we be analytical in our struggle and in our fight so that we can be smart and we can win?
Thank you.
Well, Jamala took what I was going to say. But yeah, I would say if you don't join a lot of people are already a part of some organization, right? So then how do you wake your organization up and get them to help out one of our organizations or take on a piece of what we call the poverty pie? And we can all work together. But like Taifa said, there are more of us than it is of them. And so we're gonna have to outvote them, and encourage your folks to run in places where they can afford to. But also, I like to say, just say hi to your neighbor, because it starts in the community, right? And so if you don't even know your own community, how are you helping the rest of the community? So just be polite and speak to your neighbors, to the workers, to everybody. It starts there. And then you'll feel like, oh, I want to help everybody and get into all the fights. But yeah, engage with some sort of organization again.
Thank you so much. So I'm going to turn it over to our audience members to ask questions, comments, make comments, and we can pass one of the mics maybe, or do we have another mic? Okay, so Stephanie's going to help us pass the mic.
What would you say to my boys who are almost 23 and 25, who no longer believe in a two-party system, who want to blow everything up and vote for the most anarchist candidate they can? What would you say to them for 2024? And what would you say to them beyond? And are they different?
And I would just say that anybody can answer that in the audience. I mean, we can, but we're trying to have a discussion here. So if somebody's got something that I certainly do. Okay, yeah, don't be bashful because I think part of the anarchism that we see, and even if you study anarchy, it has not really been that effective. So yes, you get mad and you want to blow up Wash U, but Wash U, they got an endowment, they have trustees, they're going to continue. So what did that really do? And I understand young people's frustration because it feels like nothing you do makes a change. I mean, I think folks like us fight every day about the vote. Like, why should I vote? Nothing ever changes. And then you look around and you're like, well, maybe they got a point there. So it's not always about what's right in front of you. It's like the long game. And as you talk about democracies, where everybody gets included, not just two white cis males or what, you know, it's about like looking around the landscape and say, what else can I be doing? Or how did I help this disempowered group over here? So I'm just really just saying that the alternatives, but for folks to look at the bigger picture and look at the longer game.
Can I just add to that? I think there's been a lot of discussions about the failure of the two-party system, and there are a lot of folks who are trying to do research around, third party and whether or not even in other nations, like that is a way to really ensure that one or two don't hold all the power and then can't be held accountable because they've, so I think that's a definite approach. One of the things that my staff is really frustrated about, and again, we do work at the intersection of the economy and democracy. And so there's one notion, right? Like we could talk about policy reforms, doing the incremental change around the edges that can really, make good. But at the end of the day, some of these systems have to be dismantled completely. And so I don't think we've done a good enough job of visioning what the alternative is. And so that's where I would say to your young people is sort of what is the other structures and systems that will really like speak to our values. I know we sort of talked a little bit earlier about racialized capitalism. I mean, like that is what America runs on, like Duncan, right? It runs on racialized capitalism. And so if there's anything that we're trying to do to make sure that our economy is more inclusive, my staff are like, well, then we need to blow capitalism up. But then what is the alternative? Socialism? And that doesn't that doesn't sort of test well to some young people, yes, but others no. So I really think is that we have to do a good enough job of laying out that vision and then what are the right kind of structures and policies and practices, quite honestly, that will get us to that world view that we have. And I agree, the two-party system has got to go. We need something different. And again, we need to do both and. I think the incremental changes that we can make, but we have to shoot for the stars and not just look at what's in front of us.
So I thought you were going to say that one of the tenets of the power framework is accountability and representative government. And you can't have that with two parties.
I just wanted to let everyone know we are recording. So, and this will be posted to YouTube. That's the plan. So just so you know, as you ask your questions or make your comments, I don't want anyone to feel like, oh, you didn't tell me, right? So yeah. Other comments and questions? Feel free. Yes, Mike's coming to you.
So in response to her question and my thoughts in regard, and I'm an OBS member, one of the things that I see that we are lacking in regarding to base building is recruitment, right? It appears that like her sons are very apathetic and want to just dismantle and just go their ways, right? And so for me, I would tell your sons and or other like-minded individuals who are just fed up and tired to coalesce again around OBS. No, actually, I'm just playing. Missouri Jobs for Justice or other orgs that are fed up as well and recruit. because we're dealing with some issues that I'm very frustrated about. One of them is, you know, we have no, they don't fear us, right? They don't care, right? It's like Jamala said, the man, he's already said, once I get in, it's over, right? And so he doesn't fear retaliation from us, the people, when he makes comments like that. So recruit, recruit, recruit. For me, that's what I would say to your sons. Don't give up. Recruit like-minded individuals, coalesce with orgs, and then go that route.
To this issue of fear. The issue of fear. So what you just said made me think about something I heard from someone who lives in Florida about, do you remember summer of 2020 after George Floyd's murder? People taken to the streets for weeks and weeks and weeks, and lots of young people. It was a multiracial coalition. That created fear. I think we're where we are today in terms of the backlash, largely because of that summer. And someone who lives in Florida helped me see that, because she said the anti-DEI stuff started in Florida after that. So we are powerful when we come together. And the minority, the 1%ers they know that. And that's why I think it's like, you know, full speed ahead with their agenda. But if we could only see our power and help our young people see their power, even in voting. You know, I have a nephew who did not believe in voting, and we were like, no, you gotta vote, you know? And now I think he believes in voting. But, you know, we really have to understand our power. And I don't know if that means going back to looking at the civil rights movement, understanding, you know, what's happened in other countries. I think there are certain things we just also take for granted. And we never really have been a democracy, like we've been a white men's democracy, but not a multiracial democracy, right? Which is what the power agenda is about. We have never really been that. And the little bit that we had toward that is being, you know, sort of taken away. But I think we are so powerful when we come together. So I just wanted to speak to the issue of fear too, in terms of that.
But I think for us, we have to look at, I think we've gotten kind of stuck on thinking protest is going to be the answers. And then I will also say that the momentum around us resisting started before the murder of George Floyd. I mean, it really started with the Ferguson uprising, because that's when Black Lives Matter came full steam ahead, and then it went right into the Floyd. So there's a series of things that happen. It's just not one event, and then you start to see this momentous change. But I think to the point that was made, it's like we come out, but because there's no demand, there's no stopping of commerce, there's no stopping of capital, which is what they're more concerned about. They're gonna let you protest till the cows come home. You know, and millions literally across the world after George Floyd were in the streets. But guess what? The police are still shooting us down. So what happened? What's missing here? And I say that what's missing here is that we do not have a strategy that's based on an analysis of what's going on in this country right now, and that it's easier and feels good when we just protest as opposed to do the hard work of educating our neighbors, folks in our families, you know, community people. That's work. And it's almost like everyday work. Doesn't mean that you can't do anything else, but as you come in contact with people, you need to engage in these conversations, because people got all kind of ideas about what's going on and why and what needs to be done. And it's not going to work because the analysis is off. If we just think it's all just only about voting, we get people to the polls, nothing happens, nothing changes, and then people look at us and say, I thought Obama was gonna, I thought, you know, Tashara Jones was going. It's not just about that. It's also about building power along the way so that you can reinforce and you can protect and save what you fought for. And that's one thing that we've shown in this last 10, 15 years, that we haven't done a good job of protecting what we fought for. I mean, we fighting like hell, but I don't think it's like an effective, smart way. And so I think like for us, there needs to be a bit of a retreat to say, okay, what do we need to do now? And if nothing else woke us up, I hope that January 6th woke us up, because these folks are not playing.
Thank you. This is Ndwale Jolly with St. Louis Integrated Health Network. Thank you for the thoughtful comments this evening. On the other flip side of the coin, how do you, in this moment where we're trying to move from mobilization towards organizing, and in the quick pace of Twitter and reactive, the convenient want to say something without knowing what comes next in terms of organizing. And so I'm struggling with that intergenerational shift around wanting to tweet before we understand and before we're positioned. How do you work with the next generation who either wants anarchy or just wants to tweet, but when you ask them to show up, it's like, well, we're done. We sent a tweet.
I'm so glad you said that. The one thing I have in response to that is just the nature of social media. And we, as elders, right? We don't understand, like, young people are learning, they're communicating, they are engaging so heavily in that vehicle, in that format. And I think what is also dangerous is that the misinformation and the disinformation that is also sort of being heavily shared in those spaces are damaging to sort of the activism and what we're trying to do. So I think my other charge there is for, I think, all of us as adults, and is to ensure that we like trust and verify. Like, everything we see and read, we need to make sure we do our own research. And I would think that would be something we really need to encourage our young people on these campuses and all over, is that just because you see it doesn't mean it's true. And retweeting something that's dangerous or harmful or wrong is like irresponsible. And so how do we teach that culture piece to our young people, that is a powerful tool, social media, but is also very dangerous. And if we aren't very informed and analytical in how we use it, we could sort of be just as careless and problematic to the work of democracy. And I think also what we're seeing in the workplace in terms of young people and the instant gratification, don't want to work like in toil over things. They want the quickest route possible. And I think, again, how do we bring these lessons from civil rights and our sort of our ancestors about the struggle and how long it took? And it's going to take a while to undo, these 300 plus years of segregation and oppression, and that long-term commitment from all of us.
I love Twitter. But I had to stop using it for political reasons because of the trolls. They're annoying. But how do you get young people to realize that they are a part of what is going on? And so that is what we've been trying to use, this new narrative that they call it the Southern Mind Shift narrative or something, where you get anybody you talk to on the door to realize they are part of the same machine that is being abused, right? They are part of the same machine where they are extracting their funds as well. But also, what can they do beyond that tweet? So that tweet has some fire around what piece of policy, around what rule are we changing? And so we found like taking them lobbying. I hate lobbying, it's the worst field trip in the world. But everybody else needs to go for a lobby day, having them meet with the people in their districts, like getting them to realize these people who legislate, they put on jeans and t-shirts too. They'll meet you at Panera and have a cup of coffee and talk whatever with you. And what I'm finding is the people in their 20s are like, wow, they listened to us. They actually had a conversation with us and treated us like we were people. And so I feel like putting their feet on the ground and getting them active with what is actually going on beyond a tweet. But now we have a, what do they call that? Online organizer who, if you tweet something that we like, we call you. We in your DM saying, hey, you said this. Why don't you come to this meeting? Why don't you come? Also meeting young people where they are. So how do you have happy hours and dumb shit to invite them to, sorry, recording, that they can come and learn about things that directly impact them all the time? Yeah, or how do you show up to their roller derby nights or whatever, softball, whatever they doing? Like, hey, I just need 5 minutes. This is how this impacts you, and this is what you can do to help. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Is there a last question, comment? Yeah. Are there two? We can take two more.
Was listening to your comment about the racial justice 2020, and I wanted to piggyback off of something Jamala was talking about. My focus has been on the other end of it with white folks. So trying to capture their enthusiasm, showing up for protests, and then not just going home. So it's not what Ashli was saying too. So we've been doing some political education for quite a long time here in St. Louis. But when that happened in 2020 and we tried to do some workshops and get people involved, it wasn't enough and people didn't join organizations. So I would say all of that together, you know, making the context where people are finding people's skills, young people especially. And for white folks in particular, learning not only about the history of this country from, you know, different sources than what people are being fed or told not to read anymore, but also our responsibilities, our privilege, and how to link up with other white folks around fighting this impending fascism and ongoing white supremacy. I mean, it never left, but how to connect with other white folks. And I think that's not really happening on a regular basis right now, or it wasn't to the degree that it should have after the racial justice uprisings. And we're involved in stuff here with the Ferguson uprisings too, and tried to do some workshops and link people to different things, but it didn't sustain. So in the period we're in now, I just think it's even more vital. So I'm big on political education right now, and we're involved in doing some political education on abolition and what that looks like, how white people can fight for that and reparations or what all that looks like. You know, it's a web of system of stuff, racialized capitalism too. So I think white people, young people understanding they have a place in this and could actually make a difference. I want to blow stuff up. And I do, and I'm almost 70. So, I mean, but I think I like the intergenerational thing too. We've been talking about that as well, and how to link up with elders that have been doing activism with younger people and feeling like, you know, right here, you know? That's right. So that's, I just wanted to put that in.
Yeah, and I mean, I thank you for the work you're doing, and it was making me think that some people want democracy, but they don't want to dismantle white supremacy. We got to do, we can't. It's like, we're at that point where I think, it's clear to some of us at least, right? Like, so people are still trying to hold on to white privilege, white supremacy, but they're like, but what about democracy? You know, no, we need to deal with all of it at the same time. And if we can start to get that point across, I think that would be very powerful. And some people are probably talking about it. I don't hear a lot about it though. And certainly not in, mainstream media.
Every Wednesday in my
All right.
organization.
Okay. Tell us where. No, I'm kidding. Tell us after. I think, was there a comment, Tia? No?
Yeah.
No. Okay. Oh, next to you. Okay. Yes.
I wanted to piggyback off Janie, what she said, and also Ashli, going back to communicating with our neighbors, getting the communities involved. The uprising in 2020, people were angry, they were upset. We need to go back to the neighborhoods and get upset again. And once we rattle some feathers, maybe we can create another chicken.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Any last words from our panelists? All right, well, this has been so rich. I just want to thank you all for participating, Ashli, Jamala, Taifa. Clearly, this is a conversation we need to continue at the local level and the national level as well. And we'll be here for a few minutes as well to chat with folks and connect. So thank you again for coming out. Thank you so much.